Quando eu era criança, né, de fato, o campo era bem diferente como esse atualmente, né? Era de terra, a trave era de madeira, de árvore, que era retirado da mata, né? Então mudou-se muito o aspecto, né, aqui, as características desse campo. E o futebol, ele não me traz boas recordações. Lógico que quando eu era criança eu joguei muita bola, meus familiares, mas uma das coisas tristes que eu tenho é que meu pai foi assassinado nesse campo aqui por causa de futebol. Então, de fato, isso é uma das coisas que é marcante para mim, e muitas pessoas relatam porque vivenciaram isso, porque ele jogava muita bola e por causa de futebol ele morreu e foi assassinado.
Looming high above Rio de Janeiro, not far from the famous statue of Christ the Redeemer, Santa Marta is one of the city's oldest favelas, a place so rich in history and spectacular views that Michael Jackson filmed the video for They Don't Care About Us Here with Spike Lee in 1996. Victor Lira lives at the peak of Santa Marta, representing 5 generations of a family that first settled in the favela in the 1930s. Santa Marta was one of the first favelas to be overhauled by Rio's massive urban pacification project, reasserting state control. But over the last 2 years, as Rio's plans for the World Cup and 2016 Olympics have moved forward, Lira and many of Santa Marta's 6,000 residents have been threatened with forced removal by the city. This is a complex country, and anyone who spends much time here learns there are 2 Brazils. Over the past month, we have explored plenty of one Brazil, the part that has hosted the World Cup in shiny stadiums in 12 different cities. After all the concerns over the readiness of the stadiums in the country, the organization of Brazil's World Cup went fine. Flying from city to city was no harder than doing the same thing in the United States. Some places we visited were magnificent. Salvador had an African vibe and water views in every direction. Manaus took us deep into the Amazon, where we toured a glorious 19th century opera house and saw lightning in the distant rainforest each night from the roof of our hotel. Not everything was perfect. In Recife, we saw a downpour turn into flooding in an instant in a city without proper drainage. The fancy stadium 20 miles outside the city had no flooding at all, showing in plain visuals the difference between FIFA standard and the standard for ordinary Brazilians. World Cup organizers are quick to say that no Brazilian homes were destroyed in the building or refurbishing of the tournament's 12 stadiums. But each venue city signed a so-called responsibility matrix with FIFA, promising to deliver urban projects that have uprooted tens of thousands of people from their homes. In Rio alone, 65,000 people have already lost their dwellings, according to City Hall statistics, often for as little as $1,250 for a house. Officials have threatened Lira with removal because his family lives in what they call a risky area of Santa Marta. This is his home. The collective, the public good matters in Santa Marta.
A população entenda que o esporte, ele é popular, ele é do povo, ele é uma coisa que venha das pessoas, que vem dos moradores desses lugares e não das grandes instituições como a FIFA, como o COI. É uma coisa popular que não pode ser apropriada e nem monopolizada por essas grandes mega corporações.
As the 2014 World Cup concludes in Brazil,
cadê o sonho do Hexa, cara?
The attention here shifts toward the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. It's a city that's changing fast. For one Brazil, the Brazil emerging on the world stage, this is all about progress. But the other Brazil, Victor Lira's Brazil, questions whether they're being invited along for the ride. More than half of Santa Marta's population marched in Brazil's giant nationwide protests last year, protests that drew 1.5 million Brazilians into the streets.
Desde 2011, nós estamos tentando articular, dialogar, com a esfera governamental estadual ou municipal, e não estamos sendo atendidos. Então, recebemos essa informação diretamente do atual governador Luiz Fernando de Souza Pezão, que nós seríamos removidos na quadra da Escola de Samba Mocidade Unida de Santa Marta, que fica abaixo da favela.
The critical mass of those protests didn't repeat itself at this World Cup. not least because radical and at times violent elements have thinned their mass appeal. But that doesn't mean the public anger has disappeared. The protests showed that Brazilians can love soccer and still be mad as hell over the public spending on this World Cup. Whether those protests continue over the Rio Olympics and future World Cups remains to be seen. But Victor Lira and his Brazil made sure they were heard.